start with the North London derby. It is Arsenal against Tottenham. Let's hear from Antonio Conte. But first, Mikel Arteta.
I think it's all about emotion and just willingness to get to that moment and have enjoyment. It's the nicest game of the season by a mile for what it means to our supporters, for the history of it, and now as well, because looking at the table and where we both think wants to be becomes a really important match. So I think the word is excitement.
For sure, Arsenal had a fantastic start. They lost only one game against United, and then they are showing to be a really good team. I think that in the summer they made good sign for them and improved the team. That don't forget last season, in the last 3 games they were 4 points up than us. It means that we are talking about a really good team.
What a way to start the weekend, a North London derby. It's going to be an absolute cracker. And what makes it even better is that we've got a North London derby where the winner will go top of the table. I know Arsenal are already there, but that just makes it even more exciting and more riding on it, Leanne.
Absolutely. And I think, obviously, Antonio Conte, it's hard to believe he's only been in the job for 10 months. You know, what a miracle worker he's worked. If you ask Tottenham fans if they thought they were going to make the top 4, there would have been absolutely no chance in that happening. And I think what I like about what Antonio Conte did in his first transfer window, he brought in Kulusevski, brought in Bentancur from Juventus, players that he knew that were going to come in and do the job he asked of. And obviously last week, 2 weeks ago when Son came off the bench, scored 3 goals. I mean, he's definitely going to start in this game. But, I think it's obviously in England, it's probably one of the biggest fixtures in the calendar, isn't it? All the fans love this game and it's going to be a feisty one and probably the closest one we've seen in a really long time.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it, Darren? Is this the closest we've seen these 2 North London sides when they've gone up against each other in recent years? It feels like it.
Absolutely. I think you can throw the form of the last, 5, even 10 years out the window because the recruitment at both clubs has been outstanding and that's the reason for the change in both teams. Arsenal's squad is deeper, Tottenham's squad is deeper. That's why Son was able to be dropped before the international break to rediscover his form because they'd bought £50 million Richarlison. Richarlison now, and that's another subplot, if you like, because Richarlison and Gabriel Jesus fighting for the number 9 of the Brazil shirt. That is the reason why both players will be fired up. He's come off the back of 3 goals in 2 games for Brazil. Jesus didn't get called up, so he's got a point to prove. So both those players will be rearing to go in tomorrow's match. But it's the depth behind them. You've got the players who are available if defenders aren't available for Arsenal, like Kieran Tierney and Tomiyasu, who can play right back if Ben White isn't available. You've got Bissouma, Højbjerg, Bentancur, Skip, who's available again in midfield to give them the energy in the Tottenham squad. There are so many variables. I'm not quite sure how either team's actually going to line up.
Yeah.
In recent years, you were able to call the Arsenal 11 and the Spurs 11. Not this time. A fascinating game.
I think Odegaard as well this year has been unbelievable for Arsenal, and they've had a lot of injuries this year, but for me, when you watch Odegaard live, he reminds me a little bit of Dennis Bergkamp. And Dennis Bergkamp was my best ever player for Arsenal. I used to go to Highbury just to watch him warm up in the warm-up, and I'm a Man United fan. What a player he was. But when you see Odegaard, a lot of people have said young captain, but if he's fit, I think this is going to be a major factor in the North London derby because he seems to lead that team in an unbelievable way, and Martinelli, Saka, and you're right, Darren, you can't really call what the starting lineup's going to be. And I've spoken about Arteta many times, and I've said I feel like he got away with quite a lot, because he won the FA Cup in his first couple of months. It was almost like, and he was Pep's understudy, it's almost like he got away with not being asked upon his role at the club, because they weren't doing anywhere near as well as they should be. Now they are. You can see his plan coming into fruition. A lot of young players, and they're playing at the top of their game. And if they don't make the top 4 this year, though, I do think still it will be a bit of a failure, because last year was a failure, let's be honest. They should have made the top 4 and they threw it away. So, but both teams are in a good place, and I'm really looking forward to this game.
Well, when you're 7 matches into the season and Arsenal are top of the table, they probably didn't expect themselves to be up there, Darren. Do you agree with Leanne? Top 4 is the only way for Arsenal this season. Anything less is a failure?
Yeah, I do. I think when you look at... The interesting thing about both clubs is that they've both done these documentaries to give you an insight into what life is like. And I think what we're seeing with Spurs is that they're in a much better place than they ever were under Jose Mourinho because there's much more organisation. He has much more control, Antonio Conte. As far as Arsenal are concerned, I think that their documentary gives context to where they are now.
I think it helped them, hasn't it? Especially
Absolutely.
Arteta.
All of the low points, all of the difficulties, you being a player, so you know when you go through something together, it kind of brings you, it gives you a togetherness that helps you to fight. And what we've seen this season so far are signs of that togetherness inspiring progress. So they beat Brentford when they couldn't last season. They've beaten Fulham when they couldn't last season. They've beaten Bournemouth where they couldn't last season. And you're seeing small milestones that they're reaching. This is another big test. They didn't pass the first one against Manchester United, but I think that they will fancy themselves to pass this one against Spurs.
Do you think they can be contenders, Darren?
Yes.
Because a lot of people
not to win the league,
okay.
but I think they can
But if it
finish
gets
in
to
the
around
top four.
Christmas and this is still the same situation, do people start questioning that? I know Liverpool and Man City seem, especially Manchester City, seem so much better. But I think, I agree with you about the teams they're beating, because I don't think this Arsenal team would have beaten Bournemouth, Fulham in the way that they did last year. Because I think a lot of people have said, they're only playing against these types of teams and they lost to Manchester United. I think at times people don't give Arsenal enough credit, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do.
That Manchester United game was the only time they've dropped points this season, and they still have a 100% win record at home. How much of a difference will it make that the game is at the Emirates?
I think the away team has been the victor in this. I think it's something like 16 or 17.
You just ruined my stat there, then.
No, not really. No, not at all. Not at all. Now, I tell you why it's a good stat. It gives it much more intrigue because this isn't the Arsenal team of the past. Yeah. And I think this Arsenal team, it's got defensive stability, it's got that steel in the middle, it's got that silk in Odegaard, and it's got that cutting edge up front. They didn't have that at any stage of the last 3 seasons. Jesus is a player up front who takes responsibility. He's got the energy of Martinelli behind him and Saka on the right side.
And conviction.
And
the conviction he has,
absolutely.
And he always has that willingness. And I think the win against Brentford, again, was a great win for Arsenal, because I don't think we've seen an Arsenal team push aside. A good team in form. Ivan Toney's in good form at Brentford, Rico Henry's in good form, and they pushed him aside in a really professional way.
And that's why I think you're absolutely right to call that, because some people will look at it and think, actually, that means it's going to be a straightforward affair. It was 3-1 last season, wasn't it? I don't think that's going to be the case at all. I think it's going to be much tighter.
Hugo Lloris is a doubt for Tottenham, though. How much of a blow would that be if he isn't fit for the game?
Yeah, I think obviously, there's been a lot of talk about this week about Oblak coming in from Atletico Madrid because he's out of contract soon. He's going to be 35. I think Hugo Lloris has been a fantastic goalkeeper for Tottenham. As we saw last season when Galini come in, he made that mistake. And, it will be massive if he doesn't play. We'll have to wait and see. Hopefully he can play, because I think, the way he plays out from the back, sweeper keeper coming off the line, I think it changes the way that Tottenham play. Obviously, they play a back 3 with Eric Dyer as well. But obviously, we'll have to wait and see, because Sessegnon's been playing, for Tottenham this year, which we didn't expect to see happening. So, but Antonio Conte's really good at adapting. I think that's something that you can see the players, they have a plan B and a plan C. So hopefully Hugo Lloris will be able to be fit and play.